Hello and welcome to the CSN3M Mindset Monday podcast. I am Andrew Wade with Case Specific Nutrition, and on this channel we focus on the 3M's. That's mindsets, myth busting, and mentoring, all as they pertain to health and nutrition. This podcast is brought to you by the OptiLife Academy, Case Specific Nutrition's very own online do-it-yourself course that allows you to work on optimizing your health and your habits from anywhere with an internet connection. If you have not had enough of me speaking yet, I am one of the two experts in the course. We use short, small videos, and we also use some written materials and some action sheets and some handouts to engage you and help you along your journey on your own time. If you're interested in learning more, check out the free trial at optilifeacademy.com or by clicking the link in the show notes. If you use the code Andrew at checkout, you get 10% off the course that you purchase. On today's episode, we are going to be discussing one of my favorite bullet points or my favorite pitch points or my favorite elevator points. It's more of an idea that I use to describe things in my day-to-day consults. I've mentioned it in a couple other podcast interviews that I've done. And so this one won't be as long and drawn out, but I wanted to make sure that I established it and let the world know about it because it's probably one of the single most important things or important ways to think about food that I've come up with in my time as a practitioner that's working to help people find their definition of health. I think it's very fitting coming off of the last 2 weeks, where we discussed sort of what we'll call the diet spectrum or, all the fad diets, the spectrum of them and why they may exist, why one is not inherently better than the other, why they are a spectrum and where, you will land on that spectrum may be fun and unique to you. But I thought that this was kind of a neat one because it sort of takes us out of the macro viewpoint and maybe into the micro viewpoint a little bit and allows us to sort of navigate. So it is the concept that I refer to as lonely foods. And I use the term lonely foods as a reference to any foods that are more of our junky foods, our processed foods, our packaged foods, our crackers, our cookies, our cakes, our cereals, a lot of our processed grains, and then also to a certain extent, a lot of our snack foods, things like even nuts and cheese and chocolate, all of those types of items. I even refer to, going back to the junk food conversation, some of our traditionally what we'd call our less healthy food. So I did a podcast a while ago where I talk about the idea that healthy is actually a view at your diet, not an individual food, and that there's a lot of foods that we consider unhealthy that aren't actually unhealthy, and that would be things like pizza and pasta, where it's not that they're unhealthy, it's that how we eat them doesn't make sense. These are all lonely foods. And why they're lonely, or why I call them lonely, is because if you eat them by themselves, you will overeat them, which means they're lonely, so they're asking you for more friends, and we oftentimes end up giving them more friends in the same fashion. So we eat pasta as an entree, as opposed to where we eat rice and potatoes like side dishes. And since it's an entree, we eat it as its main focus, and we often eat it alone. And what happens? Well, most people eat 3 and 4 cups of pasta, right? We overeat the pasta. We eat pizza like an entree, even though it's really more of a side dish. It's a piece of bread with some cheese on it. It's really not a complete meal by any stretch of the imagination, but usually we're squinting our eyes when we eat, so we probably don't notice. And it's very, very tasty. I know. But a way to think about it is because pizza is not a complete meal, it is a lonely food. What happens? You don't eat 1 slice, you don't eat 2. Most people eat between 3 and 6, and that is obviously more pizza than most people need from an energy perspective. And when we're trying to feel full, ideally we're feeling full as a result of a complete meal, not a result of overconsumption of a component of a meal. The same can be said, like I said, nuts, which most people probably heard that and went, wait, I thought nuts were healthy. And yes, they are. And remember, the word healthy versus unhealthy is not necessarily how we want to be describing foods. But nuts are an example of an item where they can be a part of a healthy snack. A handful of nuts, a quarter cup of nuts, has 200 calories, and most of those calories are from fats that are really, really positive in the body. That said, if you eat 4 or 5 handfuls of nuts, you are still consuming 1,000 calories. It is still more fat, even though it's healthy fat, than your body really needs in a day. And that is going to affect your energy balance probably towards the side of weight gain for most people. And nuts are, as a result, are a lonely food. They're an item that by themselves usually aren't enough. But the moment you have a snack that's a handful of nuts with a cheese stick and an apple, all of a sudden it feels like a really nice snack. It feels like a complete snack. When you have 2 slices of pizza with a grilled chicken salad, all of a sudden you have a balanced meal with a good vegetable, a protein source, and then a carb source and a fat source. When you have pasta and you serve it with some sort of protein source, whether it be using a chickpea or higher protein pasta like the Berea Protein Plus, or you add some shrimp to it, or you add some tofu to it, or whatever it is, and then you pair it up with some zoodles, or you pair up the pasta with some chopped up zucchini, onions, and peppers, and you eat a salad with it. All of a sudden, we're taking that carbohydrate and we're putting it as the side dish. We're allowing it to be a part of the entree as opposed to the entree. That lonely food has friends, and what does that do? It regulates our appetite, regulates our energy, and suddenly transforms this food that our culture has deemed unhealthy and turned it into a part of a healthy meal. In one of the podcasts that I did a couple months back, one of the comments was cereal. In the cereal commercials, it always says part of a complete breakfast. And that is exactly why cereal is a lonely food, right? In the cereal commercials, they don't ever show you just eating a bowl of cereal. There's always a bowl of cereal, and there's always like a hard-boiled egg and like a banana or something like that. And it's because cereal is just like pasta, just like pizza, just like nuts, in that it is not a balanced, complete meal on itself. And oftentimes, if you eat it, you're not going to just eat it, right? You're going to eat more of it, eat too much of it, overdo it, or you're going to eat it as a part of a balanced breakfast, and you're going to eat the appropriate amount of it. This becomes a really neat mindset when we step back from the meals like the pizza and the pasta, and the dishes like the cereal, and we start to look at snacky foods. And so things like Oreos, for example, where 2 Oreos is a serving. And if you're sitting down to eat a snack because you're hungry, obviously 2 Oreos is not going to be the solution to that. Oreos are tasty, they're a treat, they're delicious, but they are not filling. That is not a word I'd use to describe them. So what happens? We basically stuff ourselves right past 2 and end up with a sleeve of Oreos as the snack. And then a lot of times, particularly in offices, people eat cupcakes or donuts or cookies as a random afternoon snack pick-me-up because they're getting hungry and they walk past the kitchen. They're probably stressed out and their mind sees sugar and gets excited. And lo and behold, what happens? We don't just have one. We have 2 or 3. We have a handful of the peanut M&Ms, or we have multiple chocolates from the chocolate dish. Those are all lonely foods. And what happens with them is they're all high in sugar. So you eat them, they go straight into the bloodstream, they spike, they make you feel good for a hot second, but they also stimulate appetite and make you want more. And oftentimes when we eat these things, we're not in a place where we're eating complete foods or even we have access to things. So instead of eating something else, you just continue eating that. And so what I encourage a lot of people to do is make sure that we keep our food in meals or keep our food in piles. So avoid the grazing, right? Keep the food in the piles as the best we can. And with that, if we're going to have a dessert type food, ideally it's as a part of a meal. And the reason for that is because a cupcake by itself is in your bloodstream in about 10 to 15 minutes and often leads to increased hunger. But if you just ate a complete meal, something that has a protein source and a fat source and a carbohydrate and a vegetable, that is going to take 2 or 3 hours to digest, which means the cupcake that you ate with it is also going to take 2 to 3 hours to digest. So all of a sudden we don't feel the need to give it friends because it didn't need cupcake friends. It had protein and vegetable and carbohydrate and fat as friends. So lonely foods, it's that realization that as a society, we've started grazing and snacking and eating isolated items, mostly out of convenience and lack of preparation. But if we can take our intentions, like we talked about the last 2 weeks, and we can put our food in piles, a breakfast, a lunch, a snack, a dinner, right? 4 piles throughout the course of a day. And we can include some fun, lonely foods in those piles and pair them up with things that are more filling, like our protein sources, like our vegetable sources, like our fruits. Those things can pair up well and make a complete meal. And just as a quick allusion or note to the podcast I'll be doing in the coming weeks about intermittent fasting, intermittent fasting is a spectrum of strategies. It's not one thing, but for most people, all it really is it is doing exactly what we just said. It's picking a number of meals and then spreading them across a set amount of time. And while some people utilize fasting because they have metabolic issues that need corrected, and I actually work with people on that issue with that strategy, most people don't actually fast when they say intermittent fasting. They're just eating in a more clear window, and then they're not eating during a period of time, which is not fasting all the time. It's just kind of normal, right? So if we have those 4 meals between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. or 9 a.m. and 7 p.m., which would be a 10 or a 12-hour span, that means that we're quote unquote in a fasted state for 12 to 14 hours. That's not intermittent fasting. That is not fasting. That's just sensible eating. That's eating with intention. And to be honest, 95% of people, or even more than that, if they did that and just said, I'm paying attention to my spread of food and skipped claiming intermittent fasting, they would feel better. Energy levels would be stable. If weight loss was the goal, weight loss would occur. And it's because it's not really essentially that we're fasting, it's that our body is getting fed properly. And we've gotten so detached from that in our society where we constantly are just eating, grazing, snacking from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed, giving us parameters, which is what intermittent fasting does for a lot of people, really is the reason why there's success. And it's like I said the last couple of weeks, it gives you intention, gives you awareness, it gives you some parameters to focus on, which what does that do? It increases your consistency. And so instead of us blindly following a fad, if we better understand why the fad can cause some success, we can take notes and then learn what way maybe we can do, not directly following the fad blindly, but instead customizing it to ourselves, because nutrition and health are, after all, case specific. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. If you have not already, please subscribe to our channel and share this on your favorite social media with a friend or loved one. Don't forget to do your part and hashtag spread the health when you post about us. For more case-specific nutrition content, check us out on social media at Case Specific Nutrition and check us out on our website, casespecificnutrition.com. We will be back next week with another CSN3M Mindset Monday podcast.